So as you can see in my hands, I do have an original copy of the PlayStation 2 game Silent Hill 2. Yep, I'll say that there's a little bit of proof that I did play the game. I know about the game, and basically I'm just gonna. It's kind of like a visual show off to tell you, because this game is basically gonna be a little bit of the subject of the movie we saw today, which is none other than Return to Silent Hill, which is the latest adaptation of a video game, which is of course the third adaptation of the Silent Hill franchise, and of course this one tackles the Silent Hill 2, which is of course the this is kind of like the fan favorite or the most notorious of the Silent Hill games. Of truth to be told, I wouldn't exactly call myself kind of like the biggest fan of the series. I'm more kind of like a casual, and as a guy who likes horror, I got sucked into it. And well, truth to be told, I only played the first game, and of course the second one, which the best way I can describe is that the franchise is basically about a town in the United States called Silent Hill, in which basically it is a cursed town that it swaps between realities between the real world and hellish world, where your biggest nightmares can come to life. And this is all due because, well, as far as I can gather, there was a cult that was involved in it, and well, things went wrong, and well, that's what had happened. It's kind of like a town that basically it went too far to the sun, and all hell broke loose, and it kind of has this bending between realities that makes kind of like sends people who are on the zone going into one place or another. Is filled with monsters, and well, each game I know that it has some characters that go in there. And basically it kind of uses the town to go into their own nightmare, their own traumas, and basically kind of builds a story within it. Yeah, there's happening a lot of games. Although lately, after the third or fourth game, this is when the games kind of went downhill. At least from what my perception. I did saw the third game, although I didn't care much about it. But I do want to have a copy of Silent Hill 4, which is considered the black sheep. But I think that there are some warm receptions to it that makes me really curious, really curious. But of course that we are concentrating on Silent Hill 2 this time, even because Silent Hill 2. The biggest reason why is the kind of like the people saying that is one of the best games of all time, one of the best of the series, and all that. The biggest reason is that, well, the first game was basically a horror game, a survival horror game. It has all kind of like the bases. It was done well, but then the narrative of Silent Hill 2. It kind of, instead of just being a survival horror, which it is, and it does have some scary aspects, it is mostly notorious because the narrative becomes a little bit not only too metaphorically, but also it dwells a little bit too deep in the psychological horror of the characterizations. But basically, Silent Hill 2 to give you a synopsis, Silent Hill 2, it does have some of the aspects of the first game. It actually sets place in the same place. It follows kind of like this. It borrows the elements of the first one. It still have kind of like the background and all that stuff, but the town itself and its horrors, it kind of becomes a little bit both secondary and primary to the journey of the characters. In this case, we follow the journey of a man named James Sunderland. He is he's a guy who is grieving that he lost his wife. He's very down in his dump and all this stuff until suddenly he receives a letter from his deceased wife, which basically says that she's gonna meet him there where in Silent Hill. So perplexed at how is it weird that he got a letter from a woman that basically died. He goes there, and of course he goes into the horrors of not only Silent Hill, but also in himself. And the more you go deeper into the rabbit hole, a lot of pieces it gets cemented about the relationship between him and his wife Mary, but alongside he also meets kind of like a set of very interesting characters. Like for example, there's this woman named Maria who she looks like his wife Mary, but a little bit, how can I say, more, well, for lack of better words, hot. He also meets this little girl named Laura, who is kind of like this mischievous kid who goes around who also looking for Mary. But Laura, let's say, that doesn't like James. He also meets Eddie, this fat guy who he has a very, very low self-esteem, to put it bluntly. Also, this woman named Angela, who is looking for her mother, also in Silent Hill, but let's say that she also has her own personal demons, I'll say. And you know what? I think I drag on a little bit too long about talking about the Silent Hill 2, but the idea is that this is what the Return to Silent Hill is about. It does have those elements from Silent Hill 2, and I'm just saying this just to give you a little bit into perspective. And don't worry, I know that I might gonna compare a lot the game, the movie with the game and vice versa, but keep in mind that because I play the game, unfortunately, it is kind of cemented into my head to make comparisons. But I will give it my best to also try to separate a movie from an adaptation, because adaptation can be different. And the funny thing is that Return to Silent Hill was made by the same director of the first Silent Hill movie. What was his name again? Let me see here. The name of the guy. Sorry. Now it got topsy-turvy there. Christoph Gans. It's surprised. I am very surprised that over the years that ever since that first movie came, people begin to like it, express that they like it. They begin to warm up to it. Unfortunately, I am not one of those. I only saw that movie once, and I remember that I didn't like it. And the funny thing is that when I saw the first movie, I had absolutely no knowledge about everything about Silent Hill. This was gonna be kind of like the window of me opening into the franchise, and it didn't help. That movie, I mean, it wasn't kind of like the worst thing, but it had a lot of problems, and it had a lot of problems. It was the first movie wasn't kind of like a bit of an adaptation of the first game, but a lot of things kind of like doesn't work. For example, there were some elements of the other games that doesn't mix well with the others. It has kind of like this typical but really cliche story about a mother's love, when in reality in the game it's kind of is a little bit the opposite, in which that mother is actually the main antagonist. And but also they have this Sean Bean subplot that goes nowhere and drags the story to a halt. So there are some elements that doesn't work on that movie. So it didn't age well, at least for me. Although I am open to give it another try if that happens. And then many years later, another movie came out. And that one is based on Silent Hill and Silent Hill 3. That one I haven't seen, but the reception was really bad. Really bad. I even saw a failures review about it, and man, that I'm glad that I didn't watch it. And now that we are now in this era in which they are now trying to exploit video games movies, because they thought that they got rid of the curse that video game movies are bad, but I already said in many reviews that people are getting a little bit too condescending on that belief, because they think that the curse got out because of the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, because they say, hey, the Sonic the Hedgehog movie is good, but but it's not. The Sonic the Hedgehog movies, they're well made, but personally I don't think they're good movies, because they really want to put Sonic as a sideline for James Marsden. And honestly, this is why I even make this tired joke, and I don't get tired of that joke myself, saying that the Sonic movies will be greatly beneficial if they get rid of everything that involves James Marsden and his rom-com club. The biggest proof, of course, the Knuckles series, which that Knuckles series should go right into Silent Hill. But lately, you can tell that now they're taking steps backwards, because man, that more of video game movies are becoming worse, and they are returning to the Dark Ages, like the Until Dawn movie, the Minecraft movie, the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, in which they have kind of like a fan base that they are basically in denial that they're bad movies, but they just support it because, well, it's just fun. It's just dumb fun. All right. Be as it may, you still have, tell them the bitter truth that they're not good in execution. So, with that in mind, where does the Return to Silent Hill goes? Well, what do you expect? It was terrible. And thankfully, this time, I'm not the only one. I was surprised that when I was, while I don't trust Rotten Tomatoes, I was actually kind of like surprised that this movie had kind of like a 7% on its score, and I was like, is that bad? For starters, I know that this movie wasn't even promoted well. I only knew about the existence about this movie since when the year started, and I was like, wait, there's gonna be a third Silent Hill movie. But let's not forget, we're talking about January. We're in January, so I watched it. And let me tell you, it was a packed house in my movie theater. Even though the room that I went, it was relatively small, but boy, that this movie was not good. in a lot of aspects. And you know what? Even not only it butchered itself, the Silent Hill 2, but it butchered itself as a good movie itself. It is because even I'm gonna take away that this is an adaptation of Silent Hill 2, because I'm not trying to be one of those guys who is a purist and all that. But even leaving aside, this movie is a mess. It's a mess of incoherency in which I know that it tries to capture the nightmare scenarios and the kind of cinematography that inspires Silent Hill, which is basically this movie that I only know what it is, but I haven't seen it completely yet. It's a known movie known as Jacob's Ladder, which is Jacob's Ladder. I know that is basically a movie that is more on the psychological horror and a nightmarish kind of type of pacing, which is admirable, but at the same time is hard to follow or imitate. And which basically is it kind of uses this kind of storytelling that it moves from one place to another in a way that it feels like you're trapped in a dream, or a nightmare. Things happen. Sometimes they go from one place to another, feeling that you're kind of like Inception or something like that. A movie that a lot of people love, but I despise. I despise. It wants to do that, but honestly, I don't think that this movie kind of like works on what it is. It has, and again, I already told you the synopsis of the movie because it's basically that, but there's some certain elements. So let me try to give you some of the aspects of what this movie is about. For example, yes, it follows the plot of Silent Hill 2 if you're familiar with the game, it follows almost all the elements, which is basically kind of like a 20-hour game that it was condensed in like 2 hours and 30 minutes. For starters, we got, of course, the guy who plays James Sunderland, he's played by this guy named Jeremy Irvine. I will say that this guy, he gave it half because he does well on his performance. He's doing his best for essentially some mediocre material that they gave him. But I will say that they really not nailed. They really not nailed that. How can I say it? The way he looks. James Sunderland. When you look at it at how he looks both in the original game and of course the remake that I haven't played, he's basically kind of like this tall man, kind of handsome as you can see, blonde hair, getting a little bit closer to Leon Kennedy from Resident Evil, but they decided to hire this guy and not give him the makeup to make him look like James Sunderland. And instead of looking like James Sunderland, for some reason he kind of looks more like a younger Ethan Hawke or something like that. I don't know if it is. I make it the right comparison, but he doesn't. But when I look at the guy, he really doesn't look like James Sunderland, which is baffling. I mean, even as terrible the second Silent Hill movie was, at least they made the girl who played the protagonist, Heather. They made the effort to make her look like the game, like the one in the game, so it could be kind of like recognizable a little bit. Maybe the author they didn't want it to get too close to the sun, and then as everything follows and the character can see even the games from the other characters, they are basically very different, or they're very different from the games, but you can tell that they wanted to showcase some certain similarities to it. For example, For example, when James meets Angela, Jason, Angela, she doesn't have that she's looking for her mother or her psychosis or something like that. But she's this woman who looks like malnourished and she has the sweater. There's Mary and Maria, of course, who's basically a blonde woman who, well, both of them can't act. I'm seriously, both. There's a reason why they're both. I think they're both played by the same character. Let me check something like that. You know what? It doesn't say it doesn't say exactly if Mary and Maria are technically the same character, are technically the same actress. But well, when you play the game, you get the idea of what I'm talking about. I'm not gonna try to spoil too much about Silent Hill 2, but I will have spoilers on this movie because I don't think this movie kind of deserves your money. They also kind of butchers Laura because in the game she's kind of like this bratty little kid, but ironically enough she's kind of like the most innocent of all the characters. In this one, apparently they kind of doesn't even know what to do with this character. At the first time she's there, she's kind of like this scared girl, and then she kind of wanted to play out a little bit like the mischievous character from the game. But here's two things. First of all, she's played by an older girl. I'm like a girl on her 14, I think, who acts like an 8-year-old girl, which is funny because Laura from the game, she's basically an 8-year-old girl. And during the whole movie, she's carrying this monstrous baby. And it's mostly, I don't know, they made it for shock value, but I don't know. But she's only made for something that is really stupid that I'll get by. Also, the character of Eddie doesn't only show for one moment and then he's gone. And supposedly Eddie was supposed to be kind of like the antithesis of James. But in this, and unfortunately they got this guy named Pierce Egan and he only appears there, and yeah, he's still a jackass, but he's basically wasted. The only reason he's there is because they wanted to make him look like Jack Black. And you know what? Here's my jab to this guy. Eddie and Jack Black, they're really alike. And that is my Jack Black spite of the video. Also, they wanted to add characters that are basically non-existent in the movie, and of course, they don't mesh well in it. For example, they wanted to shoehorn in that James has a psychologist. And that psychologist is like, I'm worried about you, James. You need to be hospitalized. And why didn't you show up? I'm gonna make you kind of like an abscess or something like that. And this psychologist, it really, really breaks the immersion of Silent Hill because you don't even know what their purpose is, only to showcase that James is so depressed that he is crazy. And also, they wanted to add up elements from the first movie. The first game, because remember that I say that Silent Hill also has this cult that is kind of like the reason why Silent Hill is kind of like this hellish escape or something like that. Yeah, this is what they wanted to build up this cult, which the cult was only there to give the reason why Mary is this sickly woman that eventually died. And when in the game, Mary, yeah, she was sickly, but it never specified what kind of disease she had. Let's say that she was kind of in a very terminal illness that basically it becomes kind of like the reason of kind of like James' guilt, remorse, anger, and all of the things that he had to deal with a sickly woman. So, but in this one, it's only used as a MacGuffin to say, okay, a cult poisoned her, and she basically was adopted by the what was the cult of Samael, whatever, I don't remember exactly, but it's but basically they poison her and she's dying, and even though we get kind of like these constant flashbacks of James and Mary's relationship that basically it just went downhill because this woman can't she feels kind of like very, very attached to the cult, the satanic cult, and honestly, it doesn't it doesn't fit well with the narrative that maybe that it only feels like it was only used to give the reason why she's sick. And again, I will say that I didn't mention about their acting because they're ranging again from poor to, well, okay. Like again, Jeremy Irvine does really makes it best with the material that he has. Although if there's a little bit of some positive I can give to the movie is that it knows how to make the cinematography, but that's not saying much because the cinematography I'm only giving praise about how it looks, but now not how it was edited. Because here's the thing, the CGI, it ranges from decent to good to noticeably kind of like bad, I'll say. And I didn't notice a little bit too much, but I couldn't expect much from a January movie. But the thing is that at least for its credit, a lot of it has all the elements of that make visually appealing for the Silent Hill. The parts, the stuff looks like the Silent Hill game. The scenery looks like Silent Hill. The immersion between the real world and the hellish world that was well done. The monster design, of course, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but I will say that they did manage to capture at least aesthetically the Silent Hill monster. Although they really wanted to cramp up, the whole 20 hours of the game, and they really cramp up, all the monsters that they're there. Even the bosses. I think they showcase all the boss battles of Silent Hill 2, except the one that could have been easily added, which is none other than the boss battle against Eddie. And speaking of monsters, that we have to talk about the elephant in the room, or in this case, the metallic pyramid on the room. For many people are familiar that the most iconic monster of Silent Hill, especially in Silent Hill 2, is this being known as Pyramid Head, which is kind of like this disturbing giant, which his head is covered with a metal, kind of like this big gigantic metal helmet that is basically a triangle, and it's hence the reason why he's dubbed Pyramid Head. And it's always carrying this big, giant, rusty blade, which basically the movie, the game itself is basically used as kind of like a metaphor of James' guilt, and it starts following you around, doing, let's say, some risky things, and the way that it kind of stalks the character in certain areas this is what makes this kind of this monster disturbing. But it's more, I honestly, I was kind of like never scared of Pyramid Head, although it's only more, Pyramid Head is mostly much more scarier about what he represents metaphorically more than what the creature really is. But But over the years since Pyramid Head is mostly kind of like a shadow of James, it has been then later used in other Silent Hill games, and people are like, why do you have Silent Pyramid Head? Pyramid Head is something more personal to James, nothing more, nothing less. So why is there here and there? Maybe I could give it kind of like an excuse that saying that what things that are created in Silent Hill then stay on Silent Hill. Although, that doesn't explain, of course, why other games also have, the sexy nurses, the mannequins, and all that stuff. I mean, even the first game also has some really creative monster that I wish there could be people. They can come up with even more creative monster on the new games. That reminds me that I have kind of like a little bit curiosity of playing the latest Silent Hill, which that one doesn't take place in Silent Hill. You know what game I'm talking about for those who are listening to me. So yeah, they basically that's what I part of the. That's kind of like a cinematography that I will say at least to give it kind of like a positive vibe to this movie, but where also the movie doesn't work, like I said, is the cinematography, because my god, that this movie is a mess of editing. For starters, the camera is really shaky. Sometimes it tries to imitate sometimes the camera tries to imitate kind of like the absurd angles that the games had, but then especially sometimes in the action scenes, or kind of you see the editing is so choppy or so shaky that you get lost about what's going on, or you get really dizzy, or scenes kind of also have a lot of close-ups that it shakes, it moves, and every single time the movie is like, it's almost like it's been filmed by someone who is drunk. It constantly doesn't stop moving, and it gets disorienting. And of course, this movie should have get a strobing light warning. It has a lot of those moments in which somehow there's a lot of lighting that it has a lot of strobing, and this is why this movie should need a little bit of an epilepsy warning, because man, it's just disorienting, and of course the incoherent pacing. While it does follow step by step, how can I say, how Silent Hill 2 in the narrative goes, it doesn't help the movie constantly moves from one place to another, really weird, and when it's mixed with the flashbacks, and sometimes I get lost, like for example, which is the flashback, which is the real moment, and it goes like this on and on, kind of like in a pacing that it gets confusing. It gets from one place to another without knowing. It just feels like the movie, it almost feels like it is on a rush to get to the end. Especially comes on a moment in which supposedly a game over happens, but then suddenly James is on the hospital with the psychologist, and then what happens? Then how he returns into Silent Hill? Where's the people? People kind of like disappears out of convenience, and this is where kind of like it just falls. It's almost like it reaches to a wall. It goes kind of like, we're doing fine. We're going with the narrative. Oh, going there, and then at that moment, it suddenly hits itself in a wall. But then, kind of like in a dizzy state, it's like, continue, something like that. Oh my god, this is what I meant. Kind of like the narrative, it gets really bad, and I can see why a lot of critics and even some general audiences are not liking this movie. I mean, I think that I had some people who were like, it was a journey or something like that. Okay, I will give it a little bit of a credit that maybe the movie should have been kind of like a haunted house ride, almost like no story. But here's the problem. The problem is that you put the name of Silent Hill, and people expects that it is gonna be Silent Hill, and Silent Hill 2, even if you want to adapt this game, is a little bit of a tall order, because even I was in my head, it was like Silent Hill 2 is a tough cookie to adapt. Maybe you had kind of like the right ingredients, but you didn't execute it very well. I'm talking to the director, by the way. It didn't. It tries to be so hard to imitate Jacob's Ladder, but unfortunately, it kind of came up a little bit kind of like the Paul W. Anderson Resident Evil movie. Even though those movies are kind of like worse in my opinion, especially after the third movie. So what else I can say about this movie that doesn't give itself kind of like credit, because man, that it's just mostly kind of like a pure spectacle movie, and it didn't took itself too seriously to be kind of like that good. Well, it needed to be concentrated on being a good movie instead of kind of like a Silent Hill movie. Maybe the blow wouldn't be too bad if it wasn't an adaptation of Silent Hill. Maybe it could be a Silent Hill movie, but that, you know what, that's a good idea that I will suggest. If you're gonna try again, on a Silent Hill movie, how about this? Make a Silent Hill movie that is about Silent Hill, but don't use any of the characters of Silent Hill. They can have a bit of a reference. You know what? Maybe no. You know what? Scratch that. No Easter eggs. Make a Silent Hill movie without the Silent Hill character. You can have the monsters, but no characters from Silent Hill. Try to make it kind of like an original story that involves Silent Hill. That's kind of like, this is only a suggestion that I have. Take it or leave it. But you know what? Here comes a little bit of the spoiler thing, because there is one thing that this is where the movie itself kind of gives the middle finger to people as a Silent of fans of Silent Hill 2. But not only for the fans of Silent Hill 2, but the movie itself. Because even if this was not a Silent Hill adaptation, here comes the stupidest thing that this movie has. And honestly, knowing that this is adapted from Silent Hill 2, it makes it worse. But by the way, I warn you a little bit of spoilers, and I'm not gonna put the spoiler warning, because this movie doesn't worth it. But I will tell you right now. Here's the thing. Like I mentioned, James encounters characters like Laura, Angela, and Maria, because mostly in the video game, Maria is basically a shadow of James' perfect Mary. I will not go too much into details about the huge hit. It's the huge, how can I say, reveal about the whole Mary and James relationship. But I will say this: it's kind of disturbing, and it really character assassinates James, but mostly a speculation in a good sense. But the thing is that Maria is basically kind of like the shadow of Mary. But remember that I said that Laura is kind of really a wild take compared to the game. Well, in the movie, they made it even dumber. That is basically the Martha from Batman vs Superman of Silent Hill. It is. After all these nightmare scenarios that he's confronting about Mary and her suffering and all this stuff, James confronts Laura, and of course she has that baby. She kind of begins to crawl everywhere, almost like a demon spawn, and then Laura says, "Remember Mary's full name." And literally, then we get a scene where James is standing on Mary's tombstone. And the tombstone literally says, Mary Angela Laura Crane. You heard me right. Mary Angela Laura Crane. That is the full name of that character. What basically did is that it took three separate characters from the game and decided to put it in a blender to probably showcase pieces of Mary. That is so dumb that even if I didn't know that this was part from a Silent Hill 2 movie, it's dumb. And it really has a lot of dumb things. Like, for example, one of the biggest dumb things that even happened in the beginning is when James and Mary meet, in which for some reason James is practically on a car, and he has a narrow miss with a bus, and for some reason he runs over Mary's suitcases, in which kind of also begs the question, why the hell you're gonna put suitcases in the middle of the road? That's kind of like the biggest question that comes into my mind. Why in the frig you're gonna put suitcases in the middle of the road? But honestly, suitcases in the middle of the road is nowhere as dumb as Maria Angela Laura Crane. Oh my god! Jesus! And by the way, yes, we get. You know what? I'll reach kind of like the end, because honestly, it's almost like by the end of the movie that the movie feels that it's so deep that it really thinks that it deserves the wonderful music from the Silent Hill 2 game. And by the way, yes, the Silent Hill 2 also is very memorable because it has this wonderful score. It's a beautiful music, and there is one in particular that is chilling, and it involves kind of like, especially well used on a scene with Angela. That scene with Angela is very notorious, and it has that music that is beautiful. And suddenly they use it there. And by the way, you might be. I'm gonna spoil it. I don't care. Yeah, you know that Silent Hill 2, depending on some of the players' actions, it will lead to different endings. And by the way, I will say that even though I did mention the cult and Silent Hill 2 that doesn't mix well, because Silent Hill 1 is basically, it has the incident with the cult. Silent Hill 2 kind of ignores the cult, but honestly, I will say half, because when you play kind of like a second round of the game, you kind of gain access to a different ending where basically you can get to a little bit of a darker ending, and that involves kind of like just picking the pieces, and you also kind of see some lore about the remains of that cult. So that kind of links into the first game. But yeah, there are some endings. There's kind of like a hopeful ending. It has also a little bit of a bittersweet ending also. But guess what? The movie decides to use the worst ending, the bad ending. It uses the bad ending. A bad movie really decides to go with the bad ending, which it is known as the water ending. That is the worst of the endings. It's kind of like the most typical of the endings, but it's the most depressing of the endings. And it should get. But then suddenly it kind of gives a kind of like a curveball. It's like history repeats itself, or somehow it's like what happened? We saw the ending, then what happened? And then of course the movie ends. And unfortunately, this movie cannot be even saved by a crazy UFO ending, or more notoriously the dog ending. If you don't know, is that the first game and these games also have some kind of joke endings. The second one has two of them. The Silent Hill 2 has two. One of them, of course, is the UFO ending, which the first and the third one also has, which is basically it kind of plays a joke that Silent Hill also is connected with aliens and have at least two of the characters getting captured by aliens. Silent Hill 2 also have kind of like this joke ending in which you follow some pieces, and then it showcases that all the horrors of Silent Hill is made by some dog playing around with some mechanical contraptions that it kind of, and James is like, oh my god. And you know what? This is the movie that it deserves. The reaction of James with this movie is not good. So overall, I would say, Return to Silent Hill, okay, maybe I cannot say that is the worst, because, to be fair, despite its dumb moments, it's not kind of like the dumbest video game movie that there is, and I wouldn't certainly call it that it's kind of like the worst of them all, but I do have to call it that it's one of the most mesmerizingly bad movies, both as an adaptation and itself of a movie that. There is some ambition that it wanted to break a little bit of cinematography, some cinematography standards by making it feel like it is nightmarish, like it feels like it's all kind of like a dream state, and it's not. It can be done, but it's not the easiest thing. And in this one, I think that maybe it could have been benefit more if it would have been kind of like a standalone movie instead of, taking things about Silent Hill 2, because making an adaptation of Silent Hill 2, again, it pretty much is a tall order considering the reputation that it has. So understandably, I can understand why this movie it has this negative reception, and unfortunately, I am included on one of those. Unfortunately, so honestly, yeah, that's all I have to say about Return to Silent Hill 2. It wasn't worth the visit. It wasn't worth returning it.